And greetings. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. Going to be joined by our old friend Jordan Schachtel here in a moment. For the Deace Group, I'm Steve Deace. We are brought to you by our friends over at Preborn. And what a great partnership this has been between the Blaze and Preborn over the last few years. We have helped Preborn to save tens of thousands of babies because of your overwhelming generosity. Let's keep that going. You can make a tax-deductible donation today at preborn.com/Steve or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby into your mobile phone. And literally every dollar that you give to Preborn goes into saving as many babies as absolutely possible. And Preborn just practices the biblical model of persuasion. There's truth and grace. A mom is confronted with the truth of an ultrasound so that she hears that baby's heartbeat in the hopes it will convict her conscience that that's not a blob, an unviable tissue mass, but a human being with its own heartbeat, its own soul, its own personhood. And then if mom chooses life, they then provide the grace. They're there with prenatal care, postnatal care, sometimes for up to 2 years after the baby is born. None of this, of course, is free of charge, but it's free to the mom and her baby because of people like you. So let's keep it going. Preborn.com/Steve. Again, preborn.com/Steve or dial pound 250, say the keyword baby on your mobile phone. All right, next hour, it'll be your turn on a Feedback Friday, but let's begin it as we always do with the Deace Group. Good to see you again, Jordan. How you been, brother? It's been a minute.
Doing great. Appreciate you guys having me on.
You bet. It's always good to have you here on the weekly look at the week that was, and it begins, as it always does, with issue 1. Bleep, Lord Nefarious says.
Is it a crime to insult somebody in public?
Yes, it is.
You want public execution of Donald Trump and Elon Musk?
Yes, please.
And it's a crime to insult them online as well?
Yes.
He was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide.
The fine could be even higher if you insult someone in the internet.
I wonder how you react, though, when you read that the Department of Education has written a letter to the NCAA suggesting that transgender women who have won titles and set records, they should be stripped.
If somebody's truly working or a part of the Department of Education, they would be smart and educated enough to know that something like that that's not how history works, and that's not how the direction of progressiveness works, and you can't take back history.
German law also prohibits the spread of malicious gossip, violent threats, and fake quotes.
Do you think that integration was the right move?
No, I don't. When you're being integrated into institutions, into a culture that's a supremacist culture, why are we being integrated into that?
If somebody posts something that's not true, and then somebody else reposts it or likes it, are they committing a crime?
Yeah, in the case of reposting, it is a crime as well.
Last night, the conversation my fiance and I had before we went to bed was, if this happens, we won't be having kids. At least not in the next 4 years. We definitely can't have them in the state we live in now. I hope you voted. And I hope you know what you did when you voted.
Punishment for breaking hate speech laws can include jail time for repeat offenders.
Our city police force is not in the business of enforcing immigration law. Last thing I'll say is that this is something that I think is probably keeping all of us up at night. This is a terrible, terrible moment for our country.
And what we've done wrong in public health is we didn't explain that COVID vaccines were nothing like the childhood vaccines. When we say that we're following the science and the data, we need to follow the science and the data.
It's just not credible to say that thousands of people were determined to fall short of expectations.
I want to be building community with queer scientists that I have been proud to lead, but I can't.
I was told to stop work immediately and that no more research expenditures would be allowed. My study to explore how to safely collect sexual orientation and gender identity in cancer care practices.
What is something weird about conservatives?
There is almost a cultish vibe, I feel.
I wasn't having any doubts about how I voted in November whatsoever. And I'm having even fewer of them after watching that montage. For shizzle, as the kids used to say. All right, Jordan, you get to go first. What's the worst thing you just saw? What was it and why?
Man, it's just the Germans can't help themselves from, over the course of the last 80, 90 years, they just embraced totalitarianism in some kind of form, from Nazi Germany, the obvious example. But, a lot of people overlook what happened in East Germany for decades. It's very similar to what, they're trying today with the speech policing and whatnot. Germany can't help themselves. Unfortunately, they also imported hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of, Islamic refugees. So I'm very bearish on Germany, and I think for good reason.
I would argue that, brother, it goes back even further than that. I mean, even you go from Bismarck to the Kaisers. I mean, that would have been under, in comparison to the two regimes that you just cited, those would have been more benign forms of autocracy. But I mean, they have, as a people, been just embracing of various forms of autocracy for the last several centuries, in fact. I mean, there's just something unique about them as a culture, that they uniquely gravitate to that in the West, despite all of the other pushes to Republican small r or Democratic small d forms of government over the last, since really the end of the 19th or 18th century. They've been a unique holdout. They like being told what to do. The German people do. Todd, go ahead, Jordan. Go ahead.
No, that was me. That was
Aaron, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
They are the living embodiment of the Norm Macdonald bit on Germany. There's one country that scares me. I don't know if you guys are history buffs or not, but back in the last century, there was one country that decided to go to war. And who did they go to war with? The world.
Yeah.
There's something in the water over there.
A couple times.
Yes.
A couple times. Yes. Todd.
I've got two. It is really something else. To see that discussion with the guy who took over Jon Stewart's crazy show about whether or not integration was a good idea. I mean, this is going all the way back when you had the straight MLK, you had Malcolm X, but keep going back. You have Marcus Garvey, the Back to Africa movement. This was a thing back then. They were discussing if the best course of action. Of course, it ultimately didn't win out. MLK, I Have a Dream, was the path that was at least temporarily chosen, and now everybody's calling BS on that. What, do we just take away the holiday now? What's our course of action here? Because this is the mouth of madness that people like this are staring into. It's one thing to talk about, the various pitfalls, the challenges of trying to do what we did to cover up America's original sin of slavery, but to now just go, it was never possible because they were all a bunch of crackers and white supremacists is a hell of a drug. And secondly, I just got to say, Debbie Burks is just an evil Bond villain, but she looks like a kindergarten teacher. That's why they're rolling her out. They're basically going to talk to you about all of this as RFK goes to work, like they are the expert kindergarten teacher and you're the stupid parent. So just listen to me. That's exactly the psyop that's going on.
Well, yes, it is, and we talked about that earlier this week, and we got a whole topic lined up along those lines here coming up. Because you throw that red meat out in front of me and I will spoil that entire topic, and then we'll be nervous because we still have an hour to kill.
I screwed up.
So
I put that in the montage and then I forgot we were talking about that later.
You realized that you showed us too much leg and we were going to hop
That's
on
my
that.
fault.
Yes, absolutely. All right, but it gets its own topic later, okay? The thing that the point you made, ultimately, you can kind of tell who uses the racial stuff just because it's perceived to give them some form of political leverage or outcome that they want. Okay. And then who ultimately believes in this kind of stuff? Because if you do take it to its most logical conclusion, you actually end up with that clip. If you're being morally consistent, if it's not just a talking point, if it's not just, well, let me just get a whole bunch of millennial and Gen X white folks in the suburbs who are just looking for something to feel guilty about to vote Democrat, so I'm going to give it to them. Okay, if it's not just a political contrivance, which most of the time, frankly, let's be honest, that's what it is. All right, but if you truly internalize it into your worldview, this is its most logical conclusion. You have to come to this conclusion if you truly embrace it.
Trevor, no, he's not American. You know where he's from? South Africa, I think.
Yes.
Right. And they looked from man to pig and pig to man and back to pig again, and they didn't know which was which, right? Yeah. Aaron, what about you?
I'm going to talk to one person, and that would be CC Telfer. Or can I call you Craig? Craig sounds like a good name. Craig, you're the first dude to steal a women's championship in the NCAA during a track competition. And Craig, I just heard you say that you can't take back history in response to the Trump administration's attempts to make overtures to the NCAA to strip people like you, Craig, of championships that you stole. So, Craig, why are you getting mad right now that I'm referring to you as Craig? Because that's your actual name. It's not Cece. Craig is your real name. Craig, why do you get mad at me for using your real name, or as you put it, your dead name? Because your entire existence relies.
Are we sure it's not Burrito Supreme?
Your entire existence relies on taking back history.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Dumbass.
Yeah. I mean. And the arrogance of their, well, that's not what my worldview says we are going to do. We know. We know this. I don't know if you guys saw what Riley Gaines did on Piers Morgan yesterday.
Yes.
But it is one of those points that when it was over, after I saw that, I'm like, how did we not think of this over the last 5 years of this debate? But when Riley Gaines asked one of these freak shows, hey, basically she asked him, hey, guy identifies as physically disabled, but he's not. And he wants to enter the Paralympics. Should he be able to compete? And you're left with nothing. You can't. By what standard would the freak show, would the Trainee Madness guy say no? By what standard would he have to say no? He doesn't have one. So guess what he had to admit? Yeah, I guess I'm totally fine with it. So you can go full Adam Sandler, Billy Madison on the Special Olympics or the Paralympics, I guess, if you want. Just, that's your identity. Just completely just go in there and physically humiliate them, okay? Just dunking on them, rejecting their shots, all right? Winning the gold medal in the Paralympic, Special Olympic. There's a Johnny Knoxville movie in here somewhere, okay? Just winning the gold medal every single year.
Yeah,
right?
It keeps happening because, as you rightly pointed out, I think also today, like the Jewish Community Center was signing off on a basketball game that involved this.
That blew my mind when I saw this. Yeah, you're watching this like 6'3" guy just dunk on these chicks, okay, in this high school game in San Francisco, and you're like, okay, that makes sense. And then I look at the school, it's the Jewish Community School. I'm like, no one read Genesis? And they're like, let's do this. Blew my mind when I saw that. Let's get to the exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10. With 1 being the odds, Todd will finally humble himself and recognize how truly great of an American Connor Stallions is. And 10 being the odds, Lindsey Graham is just a fraudulent traitor, also living a double life as a closeted homosexual, and it's a shame to the Bible Belt state of South Carolina they keep electing him to represent them in the U.S. Senate. Rank this week's level of total depravity. Aaron?
At a 10.
I think it's a 10.
It's a hard 10.
It's a hard 10. Jordan, you a 10?
Sure. Agreed.
Yeah, I think it's 10 the hard way. I think that was a definite 10 for sure. All right, let's get to issue 2. Is the truth finally coming out?
The great retcon continued this week with former White House Coronavirus Task Force Coordinator Debbie Birx coming out and saying other people got it all wrong with the COVID jab, not her, of course.
And what we've done wrong in public health is we didn't explain that COVID vaccines were nothing like the childhood vaccines, and that the childhood vaccines, like many of the diseases, you get it once, you don't get it again, and this is getting the children to have that disease without getting the deadly consequences. That is not what the COVID vaccine was designed to do.
Dr. Paul Offit, a pediatrician at CHOP in Philadelphia and a major proponent of vaccinations of all kinds, added,
there's every reason to believe that natural infection would prevent against serious disease. And the data came out fairly soon showing that that was true. But so the administration, I think for more reasons having to do with bureaucratic concerns, because this added another layer. You had to now prove that you were naturally infected. You could probably buy, a PCR positivity card off the internet. So you really would have to show that you had antibodies to to the viral proteins, and that was just another layer that they just didn't want to consider.
Then, independent journalist Alex Berenson reported this week on scientists at Yale having found evidence of T-cell exhaustion and prolonged spike protein production in some COVID vaccine recipients, with spike levels increasing over time. Berenson later described this as being akin to vaccine-induced autoimmune deficiency syndrome. Former White House coronavirus task force member Dr. Scott Atlas summed it up best. Quote, shameful. Birx, Redfield et al., incompetent leaders of 2020 pseudoscience COVID policies that killed and harmed millions, now desperately rehab reputations and rewrite history, relying on administration and public to turn the page. It might happen.
So I just want to reiterate this timeline again. On August 6th, 2021, Rochelle Walensky, then the director of the CDC under Joe Biden, went on national television on CNN and admitted to Wolf Blitzer live on the air that the COVID vaccines no longer stop the transmission of the virus. Now, this is 6 months after their public rollout, basically. And they were already defunct. They no longer stop the transmission of the virus, and that those who have been previously vaccinated can now get and spread coronavirus. She admitted this on August 6th of 2021. 1 month almost to the day later, I think it was September the 7th, that Joe Biden issued his executive order that you literally turning the COVID toxic genetic serums basically into a proto-mark. You essentially, it was going to be very difficult for you to buy and sell without them. To the point that if you worked for a company with a certain threshold of employees, your employer was mandated to force you to take these jabs. A full month after Rochelle Walensky went on CNN and admitted on national television that they already don't stop the transmission of the virus. And yet a full month later, right after that admission, the Biden administration tried to anti-constitutionally mandate them anyway. And now, so we were already pretty incensed about that alone for the last 4 years. Now they want to tell us that they actually knew all along. They actually knew all along. This is an absolute retcon, Jordan. I said on the show earlier this week, the minute I saw these, that this is absolutely specifically timed to RFK Jr. being approved as the head of HHS. And if you're going to approve him, he was the hardest one to approve. So if he's got the votes, then Marty Makary and Jay Bhattacharya and Dr. Weldon are all going to get the votes too, okay? They're all trying to get out ahead of this. Now, we didn't play the clip. I don't know if you saw this one, Jordan, of Paul Offit went a step further. And he actually went to Anthony Fauci and said, "Thou art the man." Fauci made us do it, basically. All right, we knew the science said that wasn't right, but Fauci told us we had to do it. So I don't know if that's the official talking point yet. That they got to offer up somebody. Okay, so offer up Fauci, who made more money on this than the rest of us did, or Offit just did that on his own. That remains to be seen. But it is clear that a script has gone out to try to get out ahead of this and to retcon this. Your thoughts?
100% agree, and I'll add something a little controversial to that. I think that they're basically trying to protect the racket. If you saw, Birx was talking about how the COVID mRNA shots are somehow isolated from the rest of the vaccine schedule because our children definitely need 96,000 shots before they turn, 7.5 years old. And we definitely shouldn't look into any of that potential fraud and abuse in pharma because we know, Pfizer and Moderna are so buttoned up and all of, their colleagues in the pharmaceutical enterprise. And there's no revolving door between, the FDA and pharma and the CDC and pharma. And it's all just well and good. Like they're trying to write this off as a one-off situation. And what really terrifies these people most, Offit, Birx, people that are on pharmaceutical boards that make millions of dollars doing this kind of lobbying, inside, outside government work, is that someone like Bobby Kennedy Jr. could potentially unwind the entire cartel, and it maybe even, end up with criminal prosecutions. And I think that's what they fear most in this day and age. Yes, they look for a fall guy like Anthony Fauci that they could blame everything on to try to clear up their reputations, but their bosses on these publicly traded companies through which they serve on the board of directors, I think that's the big fear now, that people are going to start questioning what was widely accepted, maybe wrongly so, maybe rightly so before COVID, but they really don't want independent investigations coming from the Trump administration on this front.
I think you're 100% right. And I remember a conversation that our mutual friend Daniel Horowitz had with me as we were conducting our final interviews for Rise of the Fourth Reich. And we got done with our very last one, and we're game planning out where we're going to go from here. And out of nowhere, Daniel says to me, he goes, this probably isn't the first time they've done something like this, right? And, we were just speaking for me, Jordan, we were just so submerged in this one particular scamdemic and everything that every walk of life we hold dear, that it was threatening. I hadn't even contemplated the meta of all of this, because I'm thinking if we don't get out of this, there's no meta to contemplate. We have to stop this. I mean, they're going to keep doing this forever and never give us our lives back. But when he said that to me, man, it stopped me dead in my tracks. Because I think it takes even more faith to think that they just somehow came up with this game plan, on the fly, and they maybe haven't run it before. They haven't perfected elements of this before. So I know this, Todd, feeds right into what folks like you think. So the floor is now yours.
COVID was only possible because of what Big Pharma was beforehand and what we were as a people in relation to it. That's why, Jordan, God bless you for the word that you used to define all of this. The cartel. That's exactly what they are. And then we as a people need to be very honest about who we are in relation to that. We are the drug users, the ones letting our children play around unsupervised on dirty street corners. We're the ones looking for the greatest, latest blue meth. That's who we are in this. That's why I've talked about the magical power of vaccines even before COVID came along. This is a cult, and it is an idol that the American people have that is as great or greater than any other. We are addicted to this. We are crackheads in relation to this. And that's why Debbie Birx is trying to reset this and sing that nice kindergarten teacher song, because we so badly want to believe this tale. It is a lie.
Aaron?
If you just back up, even when I was a kid, which was not that long ago, that was, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, it was not even a consideration. Maybe you didn't like your doctor on, kind of an interpersonal level, or didn't jive with, but it wasn't even a consideration down to the doctor to patient level, that they were not doing anything but the best, what was something in your best interests for you. And I'm sure doctors are down at the granular level, to use one of Debbie Birx's terms. I'm sure doctors are probably to some degree caught up in this and aren't necessarily privy to make their own decisions to the extent that they should be able to for their own patients. But just 20 years ago, it wasn't even a consideration that this health system, from top to bottom, wasn't at least trying to make decisions for your best interest, really. And so you could trust them. You really could. That is completely and totally shot now. Mm-hmm. You even hear Debbie Birx say later on in that clip, vaccine hesitancy since 2020 is on the rise. What do we do about this? Fire yourself. Until people are fired or put on trial, I prefer the latter. Really made examples of. There's nothing that's going to recover the trust that was lost. Y'all had a good thing going. You really did. And you screwed it up. Who did it? What was the clip that I just saw the other day? RFK. I think it was RFK. I don't think it was a recent clip. It was shared, but describing how, what is the HIV or maybe human papilloma virus? Maybe it was one of those that is randomly on the schedule now.
Yeah.
The maker of that vaccine said, "Hey, CDC or whatever agency it was, you told us to make this. We can't sell any. And they just said, okay, well, we'll just put it on the childhood vaccination schedule. And that's why it's on the schedule now. Hey, just stuff like that. Y'all had a good thing going. You did. You had public trust and you could sell a bunch of stuff, but you completely screwed the pooch and ruined it. And I hope coming out of this that we're all going to be better for it and that we're all going to be much more suspicious and actually doing some self-education for this about our health. What are we really sure that people telling us, yes, this has, these ingredients are fine and these are great. Are we really sure that that is the truth? Mm-hmm. That's going to be one of the first steps to a more informed and better citizenry.
I think we should bring this up because by the time we come back, it'll be old news. But we don't have much time, but an interesting moment happened yesterday at the White House. The president welcomed in black conservatives from all over the country here towards the end of Black History Month. And I'm not exactly sure the context of why Albert Bourla, the head of Pfizer, needed a shout out at that moment or was even there. Okay. But he got one. And then as he was getting a shout out from President Trump, was resoundingly booed inside the White House while Trump was on stage and this was occurring. Thoughts? Anybody's have an instant reaction and it's got to be
injected into my veins.
Injected into your veins. Anybody else?
What Aaron said.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. The best case scenario is that they're self-aware enough that they knew he would be booed and they wanted that out there. Mm-hmm. Our side wanted that out there to show, hey, this is why we're going to do what we're going to do.
Right. If they weren't that self-aware, what happened yesterday might have helped improve their level of self-awareness. All right.
One would hope.
Because either Trump did that on purpose or I'm just telling you, he got a little ahead. He absolutely was embarrassed by that. I mean, you're getting booed as the president of the United States from your own guests. Okay, and that are there as a guest in your home, which is really theirs, but you guys know what I mean. Okay, I mean, so either he did that to hang Mr. Bourla out to dry, or Trump walked away from that thinking he got himself hung out to dry, probably. Let's get to the exit question. What do you think will come of state attorneys generals going after Fauci since his preemptive pardon does not apply to them? Aaron.
Right now, I have to say nothing. And this is coming from probably one of the, if not the most optimistic person on this team right now. But as of now, probably nothing.
Todd, what do you think?
It depends if any of them are like Ron DeSantis or not.
In what way?
The level of conviction. Oh, it's all right there if you really want to get it. It's about the character of the man. It's not the title.
What do you think, Jordan?
If they're focused, they can accomplish something. They should go after what he's said and done. Don't fall down that wild goose chase rabbit hole to Wuhan, China, and try to figure out who authorized what. Mm-hmm. I mean, Fauci was just a bureaucrat. Go with what he said, what he recommended, what policies he installed to harm hundreds of millions of Americans.
I think that based on these comments and what is being said right now and the studies that are coming out, I thought James Uthmeyer, the new AG in Florida, took an interesting tack yesterday against Target, saying, hey, you guys knowingly did things that were going to devalue your stock in order to appease the gods of DEI, and that really harmed Florida's retirement fund because we've got a lot of invested in your company. So we're going after you basically as a shareholder, okay, to say, hey, you can't do that. I thought that was you can't sink your stock on purpose. That's some form of, malfeasance financially. I thought that was a fascinating angle to take. I think a similar angle now exists with all these studies and admissions. Hey, we imposed your policies on the state level that you told us to do. And now Paul Offit and all these people are saying you knew all along this didn't work. And so we destroyed our state economies and we shut down thousands of small businesses and shuttered them forever, and now our constituents turned against us and everything else for things that you knew at the time you told us and advised us to do were not going to work. I think there's an angle there for sure if they keep it fixated just on that.
You're absolutely right, and that's my point. If you're an AG that just is like, I want the truth no matter what it is, that's what I'm talking about. But there's all kinds of AGs that see that, oh my God, this thing is a Pandora's box. I have no idea what's going to come out of this. And if that's you, then you're not going to get to the bottom of it.
There's got to be at least one of the, is it 18, Aaron, I believe, that have signed on to this? Yeah. There's got to be at least one of the 18 that wants to be Senator so-and-so one day. There's got to be at least one of the 18 that wants to be governor so-and-so one day, maybe president so-and-so one day, right? So if we can't appeal to their conviction, can we appeal to their ambition?
Sure.
One of the 18 has got to be one senator or governor one day, right? Well, this is the path to victory right here. We'll come back. We're going to tap into Jordan's expertise on the national security side of things with what's happening in Ukraine here in a moment. if you just heard the conversation we had about the gaslighting retcon they're attempting to do right now with the toxic genetic serums, just another reminder why we have partnered with a great company the last few years like Jace. And Jace is there just in case with their Jace case. See what I did there? Right. So they provide emergency medical kits that are customized to your specific needs, whether you're traveling, buying it for the kids, or just need peace of mind in case of an emergency. Jace has got you covered. All right. And right now they're holding giveaways all month long to make sure that you can have the right medications on hand the moment you need them. You could win anything from the travel case, that's the Jace Go, to the fully customized Jace case, which you can customize with ivermectin, by the way. And so now is the time to protect yourself and your family from uncertainty from hacks like Debbie Burks, who ought to be put on trial for their life. Your health is just too important. All right. And her guilt is as well. Go to jace.com, that's Jase, jace.com to enter their giveaway or to purchase your own case. And if you're going to purchase one, make sure you drop my last name, Dace, there at checkout for a discount. All right. Promo code DACE, DEACE at Jace, Jase. Promo code DACE at jace.com for the discount. That's where you can go to get your Jace case and also enter their giveaway here this month for a free Jace case as well. As we welcome back in our good friend here, Jordan Schachtel on the Deace Group, your weekly look at the week that was. Let's get to issue 3. Has the clock struck midnight on Zelensky?
This week, Trump issued a statement on Truth Social describing Ukrainian green shirt President Vladimir Zelensky as a mediocre comedian and a dictator for not holding elections. That followed a phone call Trump said he had last week with Russian President Vladimir Putin, signaling there's an appetite for the conflict in Ukraine to finally conclude. Reports indicate European leaders are largely being left out from the negotiating table, with just the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia being involved. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz this week talked about the change in the state of play in Ukraine over the past few weeks.
What the president did not find acceptable was an endless war in Europe that was literally has turned into a meat grinder of people on both sides. So if you just think about just in a few months, President Trump has shifted the entire global conversation from not if the war is going to end, but just how it's going to end. And only President Trump can do that. And in the Oval Office less than a week ago, both President Putin and President Zelensky both said to him, only you, President Trump, could drive this war to a conclusion.
Further addendum, an interview that Secretary of State Marco Rubio did this morning just flat out said, hey, we believe that Zelensky's trying to play us. And we just had enough. All right. He's been basically running kind of a low-level grift here while trying to defend his country. And it's clear he said something completely different when he met with myself and Vice President Vance than what he went out there and postured publicly. And so whatever games were going on under the previous administration for more money or this or that, that's all over with now. Time to bring this thing to a head. So that's a paraphrase of Marco Rubio's words earlier this morning in an interview I saw he did. So Jordan, we originally got to know you because this is your original kind of a vector here, which is national security. You originally came out of this sector. So what's going on here? Are we watching, in essence, Trump attempting to publicly diminish Zelensky? And if so, why? To what end?
So I think it's specific. This policy is specific to President Donald Trump because everything for the president is a negotiation. Sometimes I think it's mostly for good reasons. This too, the president will only really engage in moral speak like this if he's trying to achieve a result. He's not like, the neocons or the Wilsonian progressives of the past who engage in this type of rhetoric specifically just to make a point or to try to, take some type of moral high ground above an adversary or an ally. He wants, I think, he's very clear that he wants this rare earth minerals deal. He wants the U.S. to be able to exploit it in proper imperial form, I think. And, there's hundreds of billions, if not over $1 trillion worth of, value in this deal here that, the U.S. could acquire some really interesting stuff. So I think he's putting a lot of pressure on Zelensky to the point where basically he's willing to let Zelensky's government fall apart You have to remember that the U.S. government U.S. taxpayer has been paying the salaries of Ukrainian bureaucrats and government workers for the past 2 years.
And their pensions.
Part of the aid package. So we have enormous leverage over them. And I think Trump is trying to exploit that leverage. You might not like Zelensky, but it's kind of like it doesn't really matter. This is a guy who was happy to engage in Kim Jong-un as a total butcher madman. But he thought that he could accomplish something from him. So he's not ruling anything out by declaring him a dictator. I think just the opposite is he wants something from the Ukrainian government. I totally agree with the talking points, though, for the most part, that he's out of control. He's a very bad leader. Ukraine is a mess. Sometimes there's outside forces that cause things that you can't prevent. But Zelensky's basically made every wrong decision he could over the last couple of years, and it's very tragic for the Ukrainian people. But my read, again, is that Trump is definitely trying to get something out of Zelensky. He's not just trying to morally posture and say that he's awful and that's it.
In the past, Trump has said, hey, I'll fund Ukraine even more than Biden is if that's what it takes to get Putin to the table. So he has taken both sides of this based on, as a candidate and now as president over the last couple of years, based on, Jordan, I think probably his perception of who's most willing to come to the table right now. So at least for now, Putin seems willing to come to the table. Okay. Who knows if once it gets down to brass tacks, whether that sees culmination or not. But for now, he does seem willing to come to the table. And so now Trump's taken the pressure off of him and is applying it to Zelensky. I thought it was fascinating after that post came out. I don't know if you guys saw that some institute in Kiev rushed to go ahead and produce a poll after this post from Trump to claim that Zelensky has a 57% approval rating, and it just instantly showed up on like all corporate media outlets. Did you guys see that? I thought that was very funny. Yeah, not that we have any experience with that in our own politics or anything. Todd, your thoughts?
Well, my thought is a question for Jordan, just to finally clear up once and for all where I'm at. And I think Jordan and I have passed this ball around before at the front end of Ukraine, but I think Trump's reasons for wanting to utterly destroy and embarrass Zelensky have a lot to do with why Putin started the war to begin with. There are clearly land disputes, rare earth minerals, lots of things. I get that. But at the end of the day, I think both men are utterly frustrated by what I call my reverse Wakanda principle. Like, what in the hell is going on there, and what are you hiding? This is totally dishonest. We know you were like a drag queen performer just like 5 seconds ago in Ukraine. Now you're the president.
A literal belly dancer.
Yes. Now Donald Trump has conversations with Ukraine that he must be impeached for, but Biden and Burisma and they just get, and Hunter Biden, and you can't look at the laptop and you just get carte blanche. Both men are like, this is a dark rat hole and I resent the hell out of it and I want to know what's going on. And since you won't tell us, and now after all of this death, you're out. You're going to be embarrassed, and that's going to be painful on your country. But we're not doing this anymore. Am I right about the connectivity about the two men on this? They are both just irritated by who this little rat is and what's going on in this country, and none of it makes sense.
There's so many threads to pull here, and I'm sure that there's definitely Western intelligence connections. But just to kind of highlight the absurdity of the Zelensky government, for the past couple of years, the man, this guy Igor Kolomoisky, it was the primary patron for Zelensky's presidential campaign, and then basically one day his politics changed a little bit after Zelensky became president. Zelensky's government proceeded to take this is an oligarch. They took all of his assets and threw him in jail for corruption, and now he's like rotting in a prison in Kiev.
Sounds very Putin-esque.
Nobody's really heard from him since. So this is kind of like how the Ukrainian government does things. They very much have centralized control and power into this like Zelensky-led coalition. The stories have been well publicized about banning all kinds of opposition views and parties and media and stuff
church
like that.
Leaders.
Some of which, the church leader ban doesn't have legitimacy, but, it's a difficult issue because, on your border, you have Russia, and then in Eastern Ukraine, you have You have Ukrainians who'd kind of rather be Russian. So it's a mess. And, I would definitely not want to be the head of state of that country in Ukraine. But at the same time, again, like Zelensky is an actor. He's made horrible decisions. Unsurprisingly, he's completely unprepared for this role. And clearly, he's had a lot of assistance and aid and people in his ear who have made him do all kinds of things. But I think ultimately responsibility is still on him. He still has a little bit of autonomy. And just, again, like every single thing he's done, whether that's try to pull the U.S. and the West into the war, or the constant demands for hundreds of billions of dollars, the sense of ungratefulness that the Americans perceive is correct in my view. It's just one thing after another with that guy. But Todd, you're right. There's so many weird things going on in that country. Putin and Zelensky to me are basically like, they're like cousins. They kind of operate in a similar framework. It's just that Putin controls a major power. Zelensky controls a very impoverished country that's being, pushed by other, much more powerful powers to do what, to achieve some kind of end with their, proxy war against Russia. So, my view has always been that with the stuff between Ukraine and Russia, that it's really just a lot of gray area, a lot of mystery, a lot of stuff that we're just not going to find out because a lot of this is just being run by intel, both on the Kremlin and both on the Western intelligence side. So that's why everything coming out of it is just so strange, in my view.
That is phenomenal analysis. It might be the best analysis, Aaron, of this entire thing I've heard since it started 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, and I think Trump's post this week calling Zelensky a mediocre comedian, probably true. I'm not well-versed in Ukrainian, so I wouldn't be able to tell. But he was an entertainer. Calling him a dictator. Well, he's not holding elections. George just gave you a specific example of how Ukraine seems like a very spitting image of Russia in terms of how that country is run. I don't know. People lost their ever-loving bowels over Trump's Truth Social post on that this week. The neocon types lost their bowels over that. Wet the bed multiple times over that. It seems to me that Trump maybe took it easy on him. Because remember, who is carrying the big stick here? It's the U.S. and Russia. Who has all the leverage on Ukraine's side? Is it Ukraine or is it the U.S. who has been funding them and is trying to find an end to this conflict to end the meat grinder, as Mike Waltz so aptly put it? Trying to just end that. Yeah, you're going to have to make some concessions, but at least the fighting will stop and you'll still have some semblance of a country to enjoy. Who carries the leverage here? That would be us. And Zelensky has some sort of inflated view of either himself or Ukraine. No, I can make calls here. I have leverage. No, you don't. You are a pissant. Yep. You are a third world country for lack of a better word. Really, that's what it's turned into now. You have no leverage here. One of the most refreshing things over the past 4 weeks again, and we had the same conversation the first time Trump took office, is putting America back where it should be on the world stage. Not that we're starting wars all over the place, but in the way that we engage, we're not making apologies. We just recognize who we are and the leadership that we can provide.
Amen.
So that is a refreshing development over the last month, the first month of the Trump administration.
I love what you said there so much, and we're short on time. I'm going to just bypass the exit question. I want that to be the last word. What you just said there was really good. Let's get to the kicker topic quickly. Aaron, you mentioned it's been 4 weeks, so it's been a rather overall successful first month in office for Trump, no doubt. But what would you warn him about that's on the horizon if you could? Aaron, I'll go back to you quickly.
I think right now leaks are the biggest thing when it comes to specifically his deportation program. These leaks are not doing well. And it's not necessarily his administration, from what I can tell. It's the holdovers from the last one in the three-letter agencies. I think those are the biggest threats because he's winning a lot of these rogue judge cases, the very specious litigation that they're trying. He's winning a lot of these cases. So it's leaks to me.
All right. Todd, what about you?
I was wrong about my predictions about this happening leading up to the election, but he has to be prepared for it. The psychology is the same with public education as it is with vaccination, as I laid out before. If there's a national teachers strike, they're going to be crazy and say crazy things, but you have to be prepared for it because this is daycare for a lot of people, and you just need to have a plan for how you address it.
All right. Jordan?
Yes, similar to Aaron, I think the civil service, non-political appointees pose a giant threat to the integrity of the Trump administration. They're going to continue working with the legacy media, whether these people are in the intelligence community or, in the education department. They're going to be ruthless because they've seen their colleagues fired for a variety of reasons, most being legitimate. So, definitely watch out for the civil service, but continue to prosecute the war against the bureaucrats.
Predictions, Todd. Let's wrap it up. Go ahead.
Before the end of the Trump presidency, CNN will fold as an entity.
Wow. I like it, man. That's ballsy. I like it. Plus, I'd like it to be true. Jordan, go ahead. What's yours?
Probably unsurprising, but I think Trump is going to face major economic crises and headwinds moving forward because, Biden administration fudged all of these numbers, and now we're seeing the economy kind of catch up with reality. So he's got some bumpy waters ahead.
I think they realize that. That's what I think that speaks to a lot of the rhetoric, the optimistic, uber optimistic rhetoric. I think they're trying to get ahead of that. Aaron.
So I think as excited as I am for Kash Patel, I do not think at the very beginning you're going to see a lot of wholesale changes at the FBI. I'm not saying this is four-dimensional chess. I'm just saying they're going to let all of the key players here, well, not key players, but all the rotten agents kind of let themselves hang themselves to begin with. So I don't think you're going to see wholesale changes at first, but I do think going on down the line as time passes, you will see some more changes.
I could see that being the play here, which is, we can't blow our wad here too early, right? Okay, the pump's got to get primed here, and we're still surrounded by a bunch of quisling traitors.
Correct.
Yeah. I'm going to predict there won't be, despite all the momentum on so many fronts right now, there will not be a single meaningful piece of pro-life legislation made into law anywhere in the country this year. I think the movement just lacks direction and leadership on multiple fronts, and I think maybe that's a good thing. I think it is time maybe that some of the debates and arguments about tactics and strategy and vision that were kind of papered over for the last few years while we finally crafted heartbeat legislation that took on Roe. But those debates are still simmering there and are necessary to have now in light of the downfall of Roe. How would we end this once and for all? What's the path to doing that? And I think that this is a year where we're going to see many more of those internal arguments and squabbles come to the surface than actual legislation. Yeah, good to see you as always, Jordan, man. Thank you very much. All right, take care, brother.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
You bet. Folks, it'll be your turn when we come back. It's a Feedback Friday. That's next. Stay tuned. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Aaron McIntyre and Todd and I'm Steve Deace. Let us know what you think about what we think. By the way, I think, again, that analysis we heard about 20 minutes ago on this show from Jordan Schachtel and just the overall background and MO of what's going on in Ukraine. It's the best analysis I've heard or seen since this thing started. And so that's why we booked him. He knows his stuff. But, essentially what he's describing is that Zelensky in Ukraine is just the JV version of Russia, essentially. Mm-hmm. Gangster government run by oligarchs. He's the head tetrarch of the oligarchs. You get in his way, he uses government and the power, the coercive power that he has. May not be as cunning, may not be as ruthless, may not be as violent, but the paradigm is very similar here. That Zelensky is basically just... the JV version of the real thing that Putin represents. So if you missed that, man, go back and get that. Share it with people. That was a really, really smart take. And let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com. DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. Follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Please subscribe to our new YouTube channel, which we had to start all over with because they just essentially broke our channel for telling you all the things 4 years ago and the last 4 years that they now want to admit were actually true the entire time. So we have to start all over again at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. Thank you guys for helping us to kickstart that. And thank you as well if you've left us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of preference. If you've not yet done so, please consider doing so today. And then also hit subscribe on your podcast platform or on iTunes. It's follow, and that'll make sure that every time we do one of these new episodes, it drops there in your podcast feed every single time. And thank you guys for that too. Real quick, did you guys see that Apple just told the UK government?
I did see
They're
that.
going to basically just let them have carte blanche of whatever data they want of their users.
And
that's like Nikolai Carpathia level kind of stuff, guys. Okay.
I just saw a tweet as well. This is on a tangential issue, just kind of a big picture on Apple. They released their Vision Pro, their VR headset 13 months ago, and I haven't heard any tweets about or seen any news coverage about this for 12 months. That company is stagnant, you guys. It is just stagnant.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wow. But
circle in the drain.
Yep. And the West is. And that's why that speech by JD last Friday was so important. And this has happened to the West before. I mean, the West absolutely circled the drain heading into the 20th century as well. And the West would have been dead if not for the U.S. This isn't the first time that this has happened, but the circumstances now are even more dire because we're not even talking about isolated autocratic regimes with, utopian demonic manifest destinies, but literally, again, to use Debbie Birx's term, down to the granular level here, the West is a construct of the spirit of the age, and it is looking to be a hammer and sickle and an entry point of imposing that spirit of the age on its own people, no matter where you go. So that's not good, by the way. That's my hot take for today. It's not a good thing.
I ran into somebody at the mall recently, an old soccer team in Ainsley who's now graduating from Drake University here, and talking about moving overseas to England. And they talk about it so casually, like it was perhaps we would talk about it with our peers 20, 25 years ago. And my thought is, no. No.
I know. What do we have in common with these regimes other than we're just white?
Yeah.
Just speaking, I mean us specifically.
Right,
I don't mean us like Americans. Right. Us specifically, given the worldview that we bring to the table, and that is the main proposition of our belief systems. What do the three of us have in common with much of Western Europe other than we're all just white?
So little that we would have to constantly be aware what we said out loud, no matter where we were or what we were doing. Just having a coffee.
Have to walk on eggshells absolutely everywhere.
No.
I mean, you're essentially either a compliant plebe or you're Tommy Robinson. There's no in between for dissent there.
Which is why, if we're smart, and I hope our immigration policy, the first round of Trump, one of the very first things he did, it would have made the 5 Muslim nations or whatever thing like that. Honestly, why would we have Europeans coming over here?
Why are we bringing in a bunch
of
people from just more people, more young people that can't wait to plant the rainbow flag in America? Why bring any of them in too?
You stay there and you fix this.
Correct. 100% agree. This part of the show brought to you by our friends over at Patriot Mobile. They have been on the cutting edge of the parallel economy. So there's at least one product that we all have to have access to in modern America that you can now use without directly funding the people that hate you. And that product is your mobile phone. They've got outstanding service, all the same signal strength that the big communist countries have, but you don't give your money to them anymore. And they've also got a US-based, meaning you can understand them, customer service team as well. They'll get you started right now with a free month of service to kickstart your switch over. And when you make the switch, you can keep your phone, upgrade your phone, keep your number, switch your number. They'll customize it just for you and or your family. Start with a free month of service, though, with the promo code Steve when you go to patriotmobile.com/Steve. Promo code Steve at patriotmobile.com/Steve with a free month of service to get started with the promo code Steve at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Also want to let you know, again, coming up May 2nd and 3rd, it's Roll Call 3.0 from the Fearless Army, hosted here by our Blaze TV colleague and friend Jason Whitlock. Special guest, a lot of big-timers are coming in this year, but the real special guest is Tucker Carlson. You can purchase a VIP ticket to access an exclusive interview with Tucker Carlson, plus breakfast with Jason Whitlock, dinner afterwards, and more. Blaze subscribers get first access to early bird tickets on sale now at fearlessrollcall.com. Again, that's fearlessrollcall.com is where you want to go. Once more, that's fearlessrollcall.com. All right, we're going to go down to some Feedback Friday. You guys ready to roll?
Yeah. Is it as weighty as last week? I'm still recovering from that one. Wow.
I mean, there were some heavy topics to discuss.
Did you hear back from any of the folks that we talked about then?
A little bit. A lot of times people email me and want to get connected to the people, and but we just can't even begin to. I should say that more often. We can't even begin to contemplate doing something like that. The one time that it's a terrorist or a serial killer, we're just through, So it's just, you guys need to understand. I know you guys have great hearts in our audience, and we have to be perfect, unlike our enemies. So if 99.999% of you are earnest and mean well, and I sent you and I kept that email and I copied you guys on it and connected you, I'm sure it would be great. But for the 1.11111% of the people that are literally demonic constructs that did a heinous act with that, we would just be finished as a show, right? So, you guys just need to I just need to warn you up ahead of time. I just cannot connect you to people in the audience. It's just it's a liability, career-ending disaster, tragedy waiting to happen. Amen? It just can't happen. But let's start with Kyle, who's from right here in Iowa. He's over in Mount Vernon, Iowa, eastern side of the state. He says, I was at a Christmas party this past holiday, and I went to shake the hand of my niece's recently engaged fiance. I reached out my hand to shake his and said, "Hey, congratulations on the big news. I'm really happy for you." He replied with a handshake and a broad smile and said, "Thanks. I can't believe we got the number 1 seed." From across the room, his future mother-in-law said, he thinks you're talking about the NFL playoffs and the Chiefs. Todd, your thoughts? Because I just teed this up exclusively for you.
I told you. I told you. This is what's we're going to be Europe sooner or later. Football is going to be our soccer, or their soccer. And we are not capable of being adult men who can see this through to the end right now. And trust me, I want nothing more to be wrong, because I have 4 daughters that I am passing off to the future right now. But we got to have our emotional and psychological bandwidth right now is obviously given over to gigantic idols that we have no intention of smashing. So what are we going to do about that?
I got a ton of reaction to the rant I went on earlier this week about my hometown, Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I grew up. After the mayor's comments that they're having nightmares about having to enforce the immigration laws, and Aaron reset that again in the montage here last hour, and just what a difference Kent County, Michigan was from when I was growing up there, and how much has changed. Okay. And I got a couple that I thought were pretty representative, both about Grand Rapids specifically, but then about how it's not unique to Grand Rapids. So I chose 2 of these that I wanted to share. Okay. Let's start with this one from Jennifer, who says, "I listened to your thoughts on what's happened to Grand Rapids where you grew up, and I cannot agree with you more. I have seen what was supposed to be a pretty conservative, churchy area turn into a left-wing hellhole. For example, the other day, my husband and I went to the 5:30 p.m. Catholic Mass at St. Paul the Apostle Cathedral in downtown GR. I've been there a few times. We were kind of your typical C&E, and it was an occasional C&E, family growing up. And so we went down there a couple times for Christmas or Easter, I remember. So I've been there. And she says, I was shocked at several things. Yesterday's gospel reading was from Luke's gospel and on the Beatitudes. Great gospel. The deacon, though, ended up preaching a homily, and it started out nice, but then it came a turn. Have you experienced these, Todd? It starts out nice, but then comes the turn.
Roughly what size is Grand Rapids vis-a-vis Des Moines?
Oh, it's a bigger city now, for sure. Yeah.
It's bigger than Des Moines?
Yeah,
okay.
It is.
Well,
yeah.
I'm guessing, listen, this is the cathedral, which means this is the
in the heart of downtown.
But it's the seat of the diocese, too.
Yep.
And if you go to downtown Mass in Des Moines, I can see where this is likely going. It can be a pretty diverse crowd, and I'm not like we're here as diverse as in the body of Christ, you mean? Right. You mean diverse ideologically here is what you're talking about. Both, but that's one often leads to the other because it's become the spirit of the age. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty confident about what you're going to say.
Well, here's the turn that came. Jennifer says, the deacon preached that the people who were against Jesus are, quote, similar to government officials using their power and wealthy people. He also said we need to pray for people who are being deported. He said, again, we need to see that government and the wealthy are the real danger. So this is all liberation theology, neo-Marxism, basically. He used Jesus' wonderful teachings to trash Trump and Elon Musk in church in his sermon by name. I said in a not so quiet voice, what a bleep show.
Yeah. Well, you should have said it to the deacon too.
I was ready to walk out, but my husband convinced me we should just stay. It was, until the end, because it's not about us. So we did. And then after this Hate America homily came the prayers of the faithful. If you don't know what that is, you'd ask Todd to explain that. You want to just give us a quick explanation of what that is?
The prayers of the faithful, it's simply offering up general prayers, the theme, the things that are the news of the day or the general themes. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah. Okay. Anyway, the first prayer was to, quote, pray that our government officials help our planet in climate change. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me in the least.
So you are correct. Grand Rapids is nothing like it was. It has gone to the left and took part of the Catholic Church with it. Now, I would disagree with you, Jennifer, that it was probably the other way around. It's probably the other way around. The church took the community with it. Jesus said, upon this rock I will build my church. Not even the gates of Hades will prevail. So I think what you're looking at is an example of what Jesus says in Revelation 2 when he says, if you do not go back to the former things, I will come to you. I will come to you and I will take away your lampstand. Plus you guys believe heavily in that whole binding and loosing thing, right? So your theology would actually kind of back up what I just said. Mm-hmm. That pretty much it's the church that kind of turned on the community here, not the community that turned the church, more or less. But anyway, when we left that mass, we drove around downtown Grand Rapids. No surprise to see building after building vacant, trash everywhere. You're right. The Grand Rapids you grew up in is gone. I'm just telling you, it's just not what this community was when I was growing up there. It just is not what it was. But Dave Trotter says that this is not unique. You were talking about Grand Rapids, and it just takes one generation to destroy a community. I moved to Wheaton, Illinois in 2001. It had always been a bedrock conservative town, an area home to Wheaton College, which has Billy Graham among its famous alumni. So conservative, it was still a dry town when I moved there in 2001. One generation later, the town and country is completely blue. Rainbow flags are in every neighborhood and in all the schools. Just this past week, the DuPage County Board voted to remove the name of Henry Hyde of the Hyde Amendment on federal funding, banning federal funding of abortion from the county building, and then cut off public participation on the topic so that you couldn't debate it. The rope really slipped through our hands fast here. Glad I ended up moving back. Glad I moved from here 5 years ago to the free dominion of Florida now, because this stuff is happening all over. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And this idea that we could have just taken an L here and come back with a true conservative candidate, okay? Because the people would have, we could have survived another 4 years of this. I mean, I just don't see how that's even, you can even have that take and be remotely smart. I just don't. I got to believe that take is just a cover for a take you really want to give, but you know better than saying out loud. So you got a different take that's just beyond indefensible. We had to win this last election. In fact, the reason why I backed DeSantis in the primary is because between 2022 and pretty much July 13th of 2024, I didn't think Trump could win. And in fact, I saw Republicans losing everywhere in all these midterm elections and off-year elections, and we were winning in a couple of places where we live and where that dude lives, right? So I just had this crazy idea. Let's just we had to win. All I care about is winning. We got to win, have to win. So let's go get people who are doing the winning. Now, thankfully, they tried to kill Trump and missed. Because the candidate Donald Trump we got from July 14th on to the end of this election cycle to the one we had seen prior to that, every moment up until July 12th were dramatically different people. So thank you for awakening the sleeping giant. Thank you for really reminding him of the order of things and what is at stake. Because we're all benefiting from it right now. So I appreciate you guys trying to assassinate Donald Trump because you missed. All right, but you woke him up nevertheless. He received your message. He took the message as it was received, even if it didn't land and wasn't received in the way you were hoping. Okay, but we couldn't. There's no way we could afford to lose this. Just was not. It just was not.
And if we didn't have to win, the smart play would have been just let's see this Donald Trump thing through. Let's, a year and a half ago, let him do it, get it out of his system, tell DeSantis not to run, bide your time. That would have been the play, right? Isn't that the logical play? If this wasn't a matter of this level of existential importance?
Probably, but if it wasn't a matter, of course, but if it wasn't a matter of existential importance, they wouldn't have tried to hit Trump with 94 felony indictments and shoot him. But yes,
I know, but I agree. Yeah. I'm just putting an exclamation point. This was what it was about. It really was never about DeSantis or Trump on our side of things. It was about, like I've said, we got to get towards aspirational. Steve just talked earlier about on the abortion thing. We're hardly aspirational. We're nowhere on abortion, which is why he doesn't think anything's going to happen. We're constantly just saying we're not that. We're not crazy. We have to stop the crazy. Now we got to get what's our plan moving forward. I totally agree with Steve. I just want to echo Steve's analysis because he's absolutely right.
And here's the thing. Go ahead, Aaron. You want to add something? Go ahead, brother.
We are seeing a little bit of that, Todd. It's not in the totality that we need it, maybe on the issues that we need it. But when you look with what the Trump administration and DOJ is doing, waste, fraud, and abuse has been just that phrase has been waste, fraud, and abuse for my entire life amongst Republicans. Now it seems like they're actually serious about it. And what is the result of that? You're saying, here's what we are for. We are for actually cutting government. We are for actually making sure your tax dollars are going to things that should actually matter here. Okay? Again, that needs to be codified in legislation. I get that. What is that causing the left to do? They're doing what you're just describing. We're not that. Did you see Chuck Schumer the other day? Oh, of course there's waste, fraud, and abuse, but we don't want to cut it as fast as they're doing. They're doing the Republican game that we've seen my entire life. Jasmine Crockett, please make her the face of the Democrat Party going forward. Please. She said the other day I think it was a House committee, what's $5,000 going to do? That's not going to do anything for anybody. Please keep on that messaging. So
no doubt.
On one issue, again, it's not the totality of the issues that we need it yet, but on at least one issue, we're seeing a little bit of evidence
I agree.
that we are staking out and we are saying what we are for. And that's causing them to play the Republican role, which I've seen my entire life. And I love it.
You're
Again,
right.
Again, my standards may be really low here, but I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm not going to take. I am going to take yes for an answer.
I like optimistic, Aaron. It looks good on you. Go ahead.
My answer was in the context of the letter that Steve read out of Grand Rapids, letting go of the rope.
Oh, yeah.
Who's ultimately responsible? Because the we you're talking about is some people who had some FU money and didn't give a rip anymore and did things like bought X to make this thing happen. And then now we do have a Super Friends cabinet. Awesome. But ultimately, it's we the people. And that Steve has always been about this on the show. And yes, it's happened everywhere, but the people of Grand Rapids are absolutely complicit. And this is what my point to the first letter, when we talk about sports bros and things like that, this is a Michigan example. You can apply it to the Hawkeyes or the Wisconsin Badgers or anybody else. It's all up to. But would you have watched while things went that bad if suddenly somebody told you Michigan football wasn't going to exist anymore? I'm pretty damn sure the men of that community would have put up a way bigger fight on that
100%
than they would have on watching Grand Rapids turn into whatever it turned of.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Not only is there no good reason for that, there's only demonic reasons for that. Either you smash the idols or you don't believe what you say you believe, whether that church is Catholic or Protestant or whatever. You're not allowed to have a big shiny idol of any kind.
If it can happen to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Wheaton, Illinois, folks, I'm just telling you, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
To me, that's the real lesson of all of this. If it can happen to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Wheaton, Illinois, a generation ago, one of the most churched, populous urban counties in America, and the college that gave Billy Graham to the world. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. Yeah, so you're not safe anywhere.
What were you consumed with? What were your priorities while this happened? These are the thought exercises you need to do with yourself if you're serious about making sure this never happens again. You have to.
David Canfield writes, I believe you are absolutely correct to be concerned about the dangers of introducing poisonous ideology to your audience. However, I also believe that you need not fear this too much, given the fact that anyone who watches your show for any length of time is going to develop the worldview you're seeking to instill in your viewers, or at least understand where you're coming from. A proper worldview will also be a prophylactic, great use of that term, by the way, against being led into heresy and poisonous ideology. Most of us, even if we do not know the quote or its source, would agree with Chesterton's wise words. The problem of disbelieving in God is not that a man ends up believing in nothing. Alas, it is much worse. It's that he believes in anything. Amen. Yeah. Exactly right. I also share, and have for years before I discovered your program, your belief that UFOs, or now UAP, that's the redesign, have a demonic origin. This would provide the best explanation for how they seemingly defy the well-established Newtonian laws of physics. Spiritual beings, after all, are not subject to physical laws. What is our adversary's goal in having his henchmen make such appearances? A number of supposed abductees have testified that these beings have preached a different gospel to them. That was apparent in the hour-long clip that we played of the defense contractor. He was preaching an entirely different gospel, yes. Essentially, that mankind is perfectible under its own power, yes. This is what people like Stephen Greer are saying. And that this knowledge of how to perfect human beings is being held back from you. Guys, this is right out of the garden. God's holding out. God's holding out, doesn't want you to know. Take what's yours. It's all about you. This is the original lie of the world. In my conviction, the existence of this phenomenon is nothing more than the fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy of Matthew 24:24. For false Christ and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders so as to lead others astray, if possible, even the elect. Amen. Agree with every word. I was looking at a photo before I came on the air today. I've mentioned before this place is called Esalen, California. And in Esalen, California is where all these people gather together and quote unquote summon these UAP. And they're always some form, if they answer, it's always some form of blinking light. No one ever walks out of a ship and says, "Take me to your leader." Richard Dreyfuss never meets the Greys at the end of the movie and goes on their ship and flies away. It's always a physical phenomenon without any direct contact with anything of any form at all. In other words, pretty much like what David is describing. And I was looking at a photo of this, and in the group that were assembled here were 3 people. There's about 50 people assembled in this group. Actually, I saw 4 people in this photo. Ross Coulthart, the reporter, former 60 Minutes Australian anchor. Okay, he's there. David Gresh, who was one of the very first whistleblowers to come forward and say that we have alien craft and we've been retconning their technology. He was there. And Jake Barber, who's the guy that we featured on our show last week, who testified for 4.5 hours to the U.S. Senate. They're all sitting there with this group of people trying to, quote unquote, summon UAPs. And do you know who the 4th person was that was sitting there?
Connor Stallions.
Great answer. I'm gonna text that to him later. He'll get a kick out of that. That one I know he'll laugh at. No, it's oh gosh, what's his nuts? It's the guy that used to run Twitter. Twitter Jack was that. Jack Dorsey.
Really?
Jack Dorsey is sitting there.
That checks out.
Yes.
That checks out.
I mean, the photo didn't confirm it, but I know that I'm looking at that photo and that looks like Jack Dorsey from Twitter to me. So remember they said they had all these people and Dorsey's a billionaire. They've got all these people and these wealthy people from all these walks. Folks, this is nothing different than at the turn of the 20th century, all the wealthy Vanderbilts and everybody having seances, summoning things, that are telling them that they're on the avant-garde of a new human era of flourishing and progressive thought and achievement and advancement. So instead of just doing seances now in a Victorian mansion, in 1889 or 1911, now we're summoning UAPs. No, you're summoning the same thing that you were summoning at your seances. The same things that the prophets of Pharaoh were summoning in their court when they went toe-to-toe with Moses. The same things that weren't able to answer and challenge Elijah at Mount Carmel. You're summoning the same things. The same things you threw your babies into the fire to at the Valley of Topeth. Same things. You're summoning that. That's why there's no handshakes, no take me to your leader. That's why everything is flashing lights and telepathic. Because you're inviting in, and it's why when you listen to their conversations, they will entertain every possible, and I do this. I am paying attention to what this is doing because this thing is growing immensely. And we don't understand how popular seances and all those things were in early 20th century America. I mean, it was part and parcel to the wealthy elite classes. Everywhere you went, everyone took part in them. This is just a reboot of all of that.
It reminds me of your fundamental theme of Nefarious Carol, that ultimately the subject, what was her, Ray, right?
Ray, yep.
She had to buy in.
Yes.
That was crucial for the power of the dark to be unleashed.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what
she
you're
had to give herself over to it freely.
The willful.
Yes.
The darkness isn't just going to take these people over until they fully parade themselves in front of them.
And that's what is it who is the guy that does the popular exorcist, the priest who does the popular exorcist, Father Carlos
Carlos
Martins. One of the things he told me was the hardest part of an exorcism is that can you get the person to actually want the entity to leave them? They don't like how it's advanced and what the entity is doing to them now. They want to go back to the beginning of the relationship where the entity gave them insight and gave them things.
Yes.
Do they really want to be completely free of the evil, right? More in a moment. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, brought to you by our friends over at realestateagentsitrust.com. In these unprecedented times, when we have actually not even had a real estate market. All right? Between COVID and Let's Go Brandon, there really just hasn't been a real estate market in America for about 5 years. Okay. So the Trump team, of course, is going to try to do something about this. They're talking about interest rates being lowered and everything else. So if you want to get prepared to get out in front of all that, then make sure you've got an agent that you can trust to navigate you through that process, because you can't always take that for granted. And when you find one, you'll just keep using them over and over again, man. I mean, we're getting ready to move studios here in a few months. I'm still using the same real estate agent, Scott, that Amy and I have used to buy the home we've lived in for the last 18 years. Because when you find one you trust, you want to stick with that person. We want to find you that person. All right. And a lot of times they're going to come from right here in this audience here at the Blaze. So you share a value system with them as well. All right. So if you want to get hooked up with that kind of an agent, and yes, trust us, we've verified they've got a track record of success too. All right. Otherwise, we wouldn't recommend them to you. All right. So go to realestateagentsitrust.com. That's where you can go. The name says it all. realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, let's continue on here on
we have a quick point of order. This is very important. Somebody tweeted at me or posted at me and said, this is called Mind Your Business, this account. Des Moines is bigger than Grand Rapids. Just want to make that out. That was a massive oversight on our part.
Since when did that happen?
Just so sorry for that oversight.
Well, I got to check on that now. Radio market sizes. Now I'm curious, because that's new. That has not always been the case. So let me see here. Grand Rapids. Well, this only goes to like.
Hey, Todd.
Yeah.
Do you know why
top
criminals
50.
are always so sad?
I do not.
Because nobody wants them but the police.
I like it. I like it. Hey, what did the cop say to the illegal alien who tried to steal the cheese? Nacho cheese. Nacho cheese. All right, I'm going to have to look this up later because I can't have the entire show bogged down by this because
well, apparently you can.
But I am very tempted to do so.
Des Moines was 70, so 70. There's 71. Des Moines is still 71.
Grand Rapids is 58. Okay, and Des Moines is 71. So
I'm seeing McAllen, Texas is 58.
Fight.
Are you?
Yeah, Grand Rapids. No, Grand Rapids is still bigger. It's 68.
Okay, 68. Okay,
so mind your business. Why don't you mind your business? You're wrong.
Maybe one day we should do a show where all I do is respond to people who actually, or they have technicalities. My favorite maybe ever is when the guy corrected me on Arthur C. Clarke's monoliths references to Europa last week because he based it on the book and I based it on the Roy Scheider movie because I've not read the book, only seen the movie. So I like that one. We're debating
recency bias
whether Europa was a moon or something else. Yeah. Yeah, the important stuff, Todd, that you care deeply about.
Lots of idols, like I told you. Lots.
That all of America must be ground to a halt until they are clarified. Let's go next here to a thankful grandma. This is Lori. She lives in Nebraska. I'm blessed that our son and daughter-in-law delivered our first grandchild, a girl, the other day. Our son, daughter-in-law, who's a physician's assistant, and all of their friends were married in a short time span from 2021 to 2023. All of them had to have a destination honeymoon that was not in the U.S., of course. Hence, they all had to get the clot shot. I assume our daughter-in-law would have had to get it anyway from working in the medical field. Of course, I warned our son not to get it, but peer pressure prevailed. None of them seemed to have ill effects at the time, but now I'm connecting the dots. In June of 2023, the first of their friends had a baby a month early due to mom having high blood pressure. Mom was 24, teacher, not overweight, and in very good health. Her sister, a nurse, had a baby June 2024, also had high blood pressure, and baby was induced to come early. Common thread was their mother, our neighbor, also a nurse, that was pushing the toxic genetic serum on all of us. I assume, therefore, both of their girls had the shot. Just last week, our neighbor called to say that her granddaughter had a baby. Mother was induced because she also had, you guessed it, high blood pressure. Again, healthy mom, no prior issues, not overweight, mid-20s, works in the medical field. Rounding back to our daughter-in-law, she's a very physically fit 28-year-old. All of a sudden, she's got high blood pressure just in the last 2 weeks. And was also induced to deliver our granddaughter. She's still struggling with her blood pressure, heart rate a day after birth. They haven't offered up an innocent explanation. Can you? I'm praying that this will subside, but this just seems like too many coincidences to me to have it not be related to the shot. I'm just going to say, that is an awful lot of people in their 20s that you know in your circle of folks there in Nebraska, not necessarily the most populous region of America, struggling with high blood pressure decades, frankly, before it should be anywhere close to being on their radar.
I'm just going to read you something from fan of the show and longtime buddy going back to high school, Evan. He sent me this morning that dovetails with this, and I'm just going to be honest with you because you're clearly being honest with yourself and the public by writing this, and I greatly appreciate it. My buddy Evan says, I saw your post about the Yale V-AIDS study and got interested to dig in. From the article, it says, because cytokine production by immune cells was being altered, the study did not look at what the changes mean in the real world or determine whether they're harmful or helpful. But they did add, they suggest that vaccination against SARS-CoV-2 may provide protection against other infectious diseases, something that would have to be examined in another study. These off-target effects of vaccination are viewed as beneficial, not as a risk. This article was 2023. And he ends this after quoting this. He says to me, I can't believe I used to read articles like this and think Todd Erzin is so crazy for not believing this.
I know.
I'm sorry, but in the name of, you started off your letter, you're right, in the name of comfort, go off and have the things we want. We just refuse to ask, which should be basic grown-up questions. And hopefully there's still time. We got the people involved. They're going to start asking hard questions. And when they confront you with hard evidence, are you prepared to go Sean Connery? I haven't set this up in a while. What are you prepared to do?
Mike says, I'm noticing that Trump's popularity has scared establishment Republicans in Congress into actually being in lockstep with getting done what Trump wants, at least so far, which goes to your point that sometimes you can get people to do the right thing for the wrong reasons. I want to know if you're feeling the same vibe. How long do you think it'll last? Love your show. You guys are my favorite conservative hosts ever. Well, that's pretty high praise, man, because you know what? Let me let this cat out of the bag. I've not announced this yet, but you want to speak of greatest ever. Tuesday, I'm heading down to Dallas this weekend. I've got nefarious stuff I've got to do down there. I've got some warm weather I need down there. Okay. And National Religious Broadcasters is down there. And my day at NRB is Tuesday. And so I'm going to be there doing appearances and interviews all day long on Tuesday. We are going to have a special edition of the show on Tuesday that you guys are going to be very excited about. It is the 4th anniversary. Last week was the 4th anniversary of Rush Limbaugh's death. And even though I never met Rush, didn't know him at all, I do know his brother David pretty well. And David does not do a lot of these, but he agreed to do one for me. And David is going to join us for the entire show on Tuesday, looking back at the life and legacy of Rush Limbaugh.
It's really cool, guys.
Yeah, we recorded this interview, about 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
And yeah, you're going to like this. You are going to enjoy this. It's one of, just in terms of generational wheelhouse, it might be one of the best episodes we've ever done. Just because much of what we discuss with David that you'll see on Tuesday is the origin story of how we got to all of these other shows and industries, and none of this happens without Rush. None of it does. None of it does without his success. He was the proof of concept that gave birth to an industry. And what was it like growing up with him? What was family life like? When did David know? Right? Because Rush had been a failed FM DJ. He was actually trying his hand at marketing for professional sports teams, made it its way all the way to Major League Baseball as one of the marketing directors of the Kansas City Royals, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. And so when do you know, after so many different trial and errors, that holy crap, my brother's going to basically like change the world. Okay. And we get into all that, into all of that. And also Rush's life at the end. We get into that too. So when you're talking about a guy with a legacy like Rush, even a full 2-hour show is scratching the surface. But as far as I know, this is about the most in-depth interview I have ever seen or heard since, or really feature or expose on Rush and his career that's been done since he passed away. I don't know of anything that is going to be as in-depth and exhaustive as this 2-hour show is going to be on Tuesday, at least not so far. And as I said to David, when I met my wife, there were 2 books that when Amy wanted to get to know this guy, Steve in Iowa, that she was thinking about marrying, there were 2 books that she thought she needed to go and get and read to get to know me better. And one of them was called The Way Things Ought to Be. And the other one was called See, I Told You So. And they had the same author, Rush Limbaugh. And so for me, it kind of comes full circle. I just remember the very first day walking in to do my first show ever on the legendary Blowtorch WHO to take over on Afternoon Drive, and what's playing in the speakers, because what's on this very radio station that I'm about to inherit one of its prime time slots. Yes. And I walk in there and I am 32 years old and I'm about to take over the prime time slot on one of the most famous radio stations in the United States of America at the ripe old age of 32. And I walk in there for the very first day to get set to sit down at the at the desk and get my show ready and prepped and ready to go, and Rush's top of the hour music comes on, and I'm just like, we are not in Kansas anymore. All right. I mean, so many days just driving around, doing odd jobs, working at Airborne Express, Manpower Temp Agency, and tuning into Rush as often as I possibly could. And now I'm doing the show after Rush on one of the very first few dozen radio stations that launched them his very first day. I think it was August 31st, 1988. And one of the very first radio stations one of the first that did launch with him that very first day, WHO in Des Moines, whose first sports director was a guy named Ronald Reagan. And now I'm taking that over. And now 19 years later, we're going to sit down with David and talk about one of the great legacies really in modern American history. And that's coming up on Tuesday. You absolutely don't want to miss this show.
Yeah, it feels like family. You're let in because you're let in on family. And yeah, the similarities there, I say as much at the end of the show, but like between you two, ultimately, there wasn't any definitive grand plan. Both of you were just doing stuff that entertained you yourself, you liked doing and happened to be good at. And then you just kind of started riding that wave. But once you were given any shot, the other similarity is both of you took it without hesitation. It's like, oh, well, I haven't arrived. I'm not just going to spin my wheels and pat myself on the back. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this.
Taping this and what you'll hear was really surreal for me personally, because as I explained, and you'll hear that, I was a Rush baby. Rush Limbaugh is the main reason that I really started to have an interest in media. He's the main reason. And he was one of the, he was one of the reasons, kind of the first formers of my worldview. So talking about him was really cool. But then the second person to help formulate, the second person to help formulate my worldview was you, who I work for. And the third person to help me do that, the very first political book that my parents ever bought me was Arguing with Idiots by Glenn Beck. And so we're having this conversation. I'm working for one of the guys that helped formulate my worldview on the network founded by another guy that helped formulate my worldview, talking about the first guy to help formulate my worldview. Very surreal. And it was really, really fun conversation.
Also, Mike, forgive me. We went down a rabbit trail with your email because you're making a very important observation. So let's go back to Mike's note for just a second before we run out of time. You're right, Mike. That is the vibe. That is what's happening right now. I will confess that the confirmation of we're through the woods of Trump's most incendiary, disruptive, controversial cabinet, whatever adjective you want to use. We're kind of through that realm now, right? Okay. I mean, Jay Bartachario is going to create a lot of conflict, but not to the level of RFK Jr. Okay. All right. So, this has gone way more smoothly than I thought it was going to. Thune has been way more compliant in getting this stuff done than I would have ever guessed when, just a month and a half ago when Congress went into session, for the year. But here's the thing. Remember, though, because you're right. In politics, we have to be able to get people to do the right thing for the wrong reasons because human nature is totally depraved. So if we wait until everybody's motivations are sound and altruistic, we're never going to get any. We're not going to do much good, even way less good than we're even capable of in this mortal shell. If we wait until there's that level of harmonic convergence, right?
Correct.
So plenty of times you got to get people to do the right thing for the wrong reasons or reasons they don't understand yet that maybe they'll figure out later on and then buy in. Okay. That's also called parroting, by the way. Okay.
But if you're lucky enough that you actually pull that off, then you got to start working on what those right reasons are.
But here's the thing, too. That cannot be a permanent juxtaposition. People will not permanently allow themselves to go against their own worldview. All right. Sooner or later, worldview is destiny. Okay. And so as long as Trump's popularity is in the black, it's 50 plus, they're going to go along with this. The minute that it looks like there's a dent in that, they're not. Worldview will find you out. So I just think it's important for us to reset that and make that point, which is also why score as many goals right now when you have the momentum. Look at the hockey game last night. Come out of that overtime last night. The U.S. absolutely jumps all over Canada, has like multiple point blank shots on goal, cannot convert. Fluke play. Canada's getting completely just skated off the ice the entire overtime. U.S. has multiple moments there to get the goal, win the game, march off, and run the smack. Fluke play at the other end after multiple quality scoring chances. Canada goes in, Canada wins. When you have momentum, capitalize. Capitalize. Because it doesn't stick around forever. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you guys for some good notes on Feedback Friday. We got several more too. So, I mean, we could do like 2 or 3 shows of Feedback Friday notes if we wanted to do that. So, which is good. That's a good problem to have.
Yes, it is.
It's better than the other problem. No one responds, so no one must be tuned in. Yes. Have a great weekend. I'm going to be in Dallas next week, but I'll still be on the show with Todd and Aaron all week next week while they're here. You guys are getting some warmer weather too.
Yes.
So I don't feel that bad about it then. All right. We're going to stick around and do overtime for the rest of you. Romans 8:28.